Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it is the 20th of September. My God, September. It's craziness. It's absolutely crazy. Good to be here. Good to be back. I was in Flint, Michigan last Wednesday, and, flew into Flint. Really spent most of the time in Midland, and lovely little school there. Woodward University, I think, and 2,000 students, all of them economics students. And after my little experience with Malibu Trotsky, I was thinking, man, this is gonna be tough. But they were lovely. They were absolutely lovely. Beautiful campus, great school, a lot of fun. They may have taped that. It was warm in there too under the lights. I had it's kind of like a revival meeting in the South. We're sweating and all this stuff, talking about where we are. I did drink the water, by the way, in the hotel, and I wouldn't call it delicious water, but it looked like water, So there you go. So that's why I was away last weekend. Let's see. Everything else is coming together pretty well on the Star Citizen front. It's about time for us to go public with that after a mere 3 months of talking about it, and that's all I'll say about it tonight. Those of you that emailed us, back 6 or 7 years ago, we will be getting back to you shortly. I just finished the last of the graphics that I needed about an hour ago. Oh, hey, look at that. Guatemalan Water Snake is Northwood alumni. Well, congratulations. I loved it there. I thought it was lovely. I saw a black squirrel there. I didn't know there was such a thing. And I really didn't. So that was fun. And it looks like, let me see if there's any questions about it. I don't know. Let me see. If not, I probably won't take it. Yeah, it looks like we're not going to be doing any more of the hot mic shows. Just turned out that the NRA couldn't come to an agreement in terms of the workload, which was a great deal more than I thought it was when I started 3 months ago. And sad when these kind of things happen, but I have nothing but the highest respect for that organization. They certainly seem to feel the same way about me. It's just one of those things. Just couldn't get there. So I will be doing something else with that time because it was taking more and more of my time every day. And now I'm finished with the Grant show at 10:15, and it's like, my God, I've got a whole day. So going to be doing some couple of firewalls to try and shoot those tomorrow. I got one of them written. The other one is going to be I haven't decided exactly what to call it. I'm thinking of calling it Socialism for Suckers. And no, I won't be doing a live show. I might be able to do something else somewhere, but right now I'm not going to be doing the live TV. Go back to doing what we were good at before. I liked the show too, Brent. I thought it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm thinking of calling it Socialism for Suckers, or maybe Socialism is for Suckers. Basically just going to be 3 points, Venezuela is the richest country in South America, maybe in the Western Hemisphere, in terms of oil reserves and in terms of money that is literally sitting under the ground, under your feet, that you don't have to work for. It's just there for you to basically, pull it out and sell it. So they've lost 20 pounds, and if you love furry little animals and you're one of those people who love socialism and you love furry animals, then your socialism means that people are eating furry animals. They're eating neighborhood dogs and cats, and they're going to the zoo, not to look at the animals, but to eat them. Socialism strikes again. Undoubtedly, this one they didn't do right either. But, this is after 11 or 12 tries and, 100, 200 million people killed. Nobody knows how many, because the socialists don't seem to care much about human life. But after maybe 11 or 12 tries, you might want to think that perhaps it's not such a good idea. I was talking with somebody about Venezuela, and they say, well, it's like they didn't do it right. I said, no, that's exactly the right. They did it exactly the right way in Venezuela. It's designed to take power with the fig leaf of, hey, we're doing it to help our fellow Venezuelans. So there's that, point one. Point two, man of the people, Fidel Castro, champion of the little guy and standing up to the imperial Yankee businessmen, and just a real modest guy who still wears army fatigues when he was in his 80s or 90s or whatever. And when he died, he had $800 million. $800 million in his personal bank account. That's what he had personally, which he stole from the Cuban people. And I might tell a quick little story of how that works. I had some people who were in Havana not too long ago. And they said, basically, here's what happens. When you go to Havana, you get assigned, you get a taxi driver, basically, and this guy is with you for your entire stay. And when they said with you for the entire stay, they mean 24 hours a day. The guy's sleeping in his car outside a 4-day visit or something. Go to a nightclub, go to a hotel, whatever. He's there all the time. And here's the math. He's there all the time because he got a taxi license from, and was really pointed out to me, I almost said from the Cuban government, but from the Castros. The Castros gave this guy a license to drive a cab in Havana. Now, because he's a cab driver, it's a little more upscale, and you're exposed to a little more foreigners and stuff. So instead of the $50 a month of regular wages that the Cubans get, he got $100. And here's the kicker: in order to maintain his taxi driver's license, he has to pay the Castros $6,000 a month. They pay him $100, he has to pay $6,000. In order to pay $6,000 back and keep anything after that, you have to work pretty much 24 hours a day. And the reason that this guy works 24 hours a day is because working 24 hours a day as a cab driver is better than not. So $800 million. I wonder how many cab drivers had to spend how many hours, and how many people out there working in sugarcane fields and all the rest. These well-intentioned suckers out there thinking they're doing this for the people or the proletariat or any of the rest of that stuff. No, the Castros, Fidel took it and he got it in a bank account. It says it's not going anywhere. So that's point number two. And point number three, Bernie Sanders, man of the people, who says that it's disgusting that wealthy people have yachts and expensive cars and all the rest while there are people hungry, bought his third house. I have to tell you, I'm just going to stop right there. Maybe that'll just be a one-sentence firewall. If you can vote for I can understand you voting for Bernie Sanders because you're an idiot. You don't know anything about life, and the reason you like socialism is because you live in a capitalist society. I get that, and I understand when you're young. I was talking with Natasha about this yesterday or 2 days ago. It's kind of ironic, isn't it, that we send people off to college when they are at peak stupidity. I never really realized that until a night or two ago. People go off to get educated at the exact moment in life where they reach peak stupidity. Prior to being a teenager and in their 20s and early 20s, life is new and interesting, and wow, look at that. Why is the sky blue, and what is that thing, and all the rest of it. And then after your teens and 20s, after life's had a little time to beat the stupid out of you, then you realize that all these things you thought you invented and never had ever, no one's ever thought of this again, and no one's ever been this this pure, and no one's ever been this faithful, and no one's ever going to do the right things that we did, and they all failed. Older generations failed because, because the people sold out, but I'm not going to sell out because I'm not a sellout, and so on and so on and so on. So you're really at peak stupidity there, and you get smarter after college, and you're smarter before college, but we send people off to get educated when they think they know everything. So I can understand why some of those people would be lured by socialism, especially when you're a college student and the idea of wealth redistribution sounds like stuff's coming your way. But when Bernie Sanders owns 3 houses, it's over. How can anyone possibly support this? I don't know what the conservative equivalent would be. I guess the conservative equivalent would be what many people in the Republican Party do, which is go out and vote for, single-payer health care. But simply can't believe it. And it's great. I think it's terrific because I am ready. Anytime anybody says anything about socialism, they're going to be talking about Bernie. And I'm going to say, well, listen, I'm just going to shut up for a minute. And you tell me why Bernie Sanders has 3 houses and complains about rich people not paying their fair share. I'll just sit here and wait for your answer. The lakefront home, $600,000. The person who told me about the lakefront home said that he confronted a young socialist about Bernie Sanders' 3rd home. And the kid's response was, yeah, well, Bernie works really hard. And my answer was, duh. He doesn't, but put that aside. Put it aside. If you're saying, gosh, they work really, really hard, therefore they deserve a $600,000 house and 3 houses, 3 residences. And since Bernie didn't generate any wealth, it's really not his $600,000. If I'm producing something of value, certainly I've certainly created hundreds of dollars, literally hundreds of dollars of wealth over the last 8-9 years. But I'm producing something and I get paid for it. Bernie gets paid to take Bernie Sanders gets paid to take your money, and so do all of the politicians. Really, we're paying them to take our money. But there's no response to this. There's just no response to it. 3 houses. Yeah. I don't think Bernie's ever worked a day in his life, really. He's been a rabble-rouser and a politician, and he gets paid to talk. And he's saying, oh, do we really need 16 different brands of deodorant in this country? Why don't we just have 1 or 2 brands and spend the rest of the money on the poor? It's like, wait a minute. There's not... Bernie, it's not like there's a... It's not a zero-sum game. If we make 16 different brands of deodorant, that doesn't mean there's 16 times more deodorant than we need. Do you understand how that works, Bernie? It just means that the market is split into 16 pieces. And I know you don't like the idea of choice, although you certainly call yourself pro-choice. You want to live in a world where everything's pretty much regimented and controlled by you. Yeah, George Freeland says, in capitalist America, bread lines up for you. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Here in America, bread lines up for you. You walk into a supermarket, and there are, 60 different kinds of bread there waiting for you with bright labels and other hooks, organic and gluten-free and all of these other little fireworks they're shooting off to get you to buy that bread. The bread waits for you in America. That's the one thing that he wants to destroy. So socialism is for suckers. And I'll see if I can get that down to a manageable length. Okay, let's get into the questions. Why don't we? I'm liking these 2-hour or hour-and-a-half Strata lounges a lot better than the 3-hour ones. I have a life now, I know this is shocking to me. Certainly, this is more shocking to me than it is to you. But the days of me, staying in the studio till 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning are behind me now. I'd like to go home and have dinner with my beautiful Natasha and watch the sun go down and watch our little raccoon friends come out. So we'll keep it under 2, certainly, maybe around an hour and a half, something like that. See what people have to say. So as usual, now has become the pretty much the formula now for I guess the last 10 shows or more. I used to cut and paste the top 10 or 15, which was nice because I could make the type bigger and I could read it. But I'm just going to go through and look at the comments as usual by the number of upvotes at the time that I scrolled through them. So it looks like Japheth Dennis. It's a new name. Certainly not a regular, unlike the person that follows him and the person that follows that person and the person that follows that person and the person that follows that person. Just looking ahead here, and the person that follows that person, and so on. There's just acres of lonely, sad people with nothing else to do with their time. But it looks like Japheth Dennis is certainly seems the first time I remember. In any event, welcome. And he writes, Dear Bill, looking at an election map showing a sea of red with little blue dots where the cities are, it seems obvious that conservatives have failed to take the message of liberty to the urban population. How can we adopt the message of freedom and begin to take down these status fortresses of the big cities? Well, Japeth, the problem is that all of the TV and the movies and the radio come from the big cities. If it turned out that television was produced out in Iowa cornfields, then the people in the big cities would have, by and large, the morality of a farmer from Iowa. So it's not a question of the red part of the country not doing a bad job of taking the message to the blue part. The red part of the country doesn't have its hands on any of the message, certainly didn't before the internet anyway. And furthermore, the red part of the country would just kind of like to be left alone and go to work. It's got better things to do with its time than try and lecture these idiot liberals. Now, that was then and this is now, but that's certainly how we got here. I'm certainly not going to rehash. I know the difference between a dead horse and a living one, and I'm going to cease flogging the former. But I think pretty much everybody, certainly I think the election of Donald Trump shows that a big part of the country has come to understand that while we would like to be left alone, they wouldn't like to leave us alone, and so the fight's on. If we'd had this conversation, it's funny, Japeth, if we'd had this conversation 20 years ago, I'd say there's nothing we could do. But the thing that's so wonderful is we couldn't have had this conversation 20 years ago. I'm not sure we could have had it 10 years ago. Because right now, this very moment, we're experiencing live, and if you're watching on YouTube, you're experiencing in recorded form the death of all of those megaphones that they owned exclusively, and not just the disappearance of them. Because if a justice-loving alien race or somebody came over and just simply 10 years ago just vaporized asked the people inside nicely to leave and give them very nice houses and beautiful retirement package and all the rest. But if they basically come down 20 years ago and vaporize CBS and CNN and NBC and ABC and all the rest, then people would have memories of them as having integrity, and they would think of it as a loss. So they're not only disappearing, they're, oh my goodness gracious, I gotta talk no more. I usually have that off, and all my friends want to know why they can't reach me. So the good news is they're not only disappearing, they're disappearing because of lack of credibility. And this is something that I don't think I talk enough about. So many in fact, I would say virtually everything that's wrong out there is wrong and interesting and exciting. All of this stuff, because we are living in an extraordinary time. Really, really only happened once before in human history kind of thing. Honest to God, I'm not joking. We are sitting with 1 foot in the industrial age and 1 foot in the information age. And as the country undergoes this seismic shift from not from one business or one market or one brand, as it moves from one kind of an economy to another, it creates enormous stresses. And the same thing happened a couple hundred years ago when the Industrial Revolution came along and industrial life changed the agrarian farm life that everybody knew before then. It was shocking for farmers who grew up free, who were, well, in many cases free, relatively free, and suddenly realized that they had to go to a city and be surrounded by people they don't know and live in tiny, tiny little enclosed little concrete boxes and go to big, loud, steaming, smelling, poisonous factories and crank levers for 12 hours a day in exchange for their, tuppence or whatever they got paid. And that was a traumatic time for humanity. And all of this robber baron stuff and the reason that there are unions and all the rest were as a result of the fact that when we started the industrial era, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to do it. There was all of a sudden all of this money to be made, and a lot of people jumped into it. And some of these people, not all of them, in fact, very few of them, but some of them thought, well, the harder we whip our workers, the more money we're going to make. Anybody who's ever run a business knows it's pretty much the exact opposite to that. But there's certainly 100, 200 years ago, there were enormous injustices that needed to be corrected, and they were corrected. And we're going through the exact same thing. So if you want to know why there's so much rioting and hatred out there, it's because the Democrats have stirred up the black population of America and convinced them that they're being murdered systematically by white people who get away with it. And the reason that the Democrats do that is because they need the black vote to win, and they need 90% of it to win. And they're absolutely shameless. All they want is the power. But the reason that black America votes for the Democrats is because their cities are destroyed, and because of the effectiveness of the megaphone, they look around at their ruined neighborhoods and they basically realize that the only thing worse than voting for a Democrat is voting for a Republican. And that's really the Democrats' gift, you know. They were the racists that started the Klan, they were the Confederacy, and they were also the collectivists who were the fascists and the Nazis and all the rest, and they've managed to fling both of those things onto conservatives. But here's the point. The reason that we have all of these problems and all of this dependency and all of this stuff is because there are industrial jobs that were there when I was a little boy are not there anymore, and they're not coming back. And so people who could do industrial work and make a good living at it, because we were making things for the world. You could literally come off a boat, not speak any English or 10 words of it, and get a job at a factory and probably do the job about as well as somebody who'd been there for 25 or 30 years. That's the whole idea of the assembly line. And so we had an agrarian culture switch to an industrial culture, and then that settled down for a while. And then starting in the 70s, but really picking up steam in the 80s, not really cracking until the dot-com boom in the 90s, we started to do it again. And so we're facing inner cities that are falling apart because the people in those inner cities are the descendants of people who came there and prospered. Baltimore used to be a lovely town. St. Louis, Foghorn said, Baltimore, St. Louis, Chicago, all of them were lovely places. And having read the Corner, which is written by quite a liberal guy, is basically what The Wire was based on. He would say that the grandparents of some of these kids that are out there selling, speedballs, the grandparents lived in these houses that at the time were beautifully maintained and painted and lovely and glass windows. And furthermore, blacks and whites in those cities would basically just go out and go to the same churches and the same libraries because they worked in the same factories. They lived next to each other. There was a period there where everybody was getting along. They were getting along because everybody was working. And then those jobs disappeared. And what are these people going to do? It's one thing to be trained to be a guy who screws on, the wheel covers. I almost said hubcaps, but I've been reminded by my engineer friends that the thing that everybody calls hubcaps are not hubcaps. Hubcaps are a little round thing that sits on the wheel. These are the wheel covers. But in any event, you screw the ornament on the hood of the car. That's your job. You do it for 30 years. That's an easier job to learn than being an IT technician or graphic designer or game designer or somebody working in, virtual reality. It's a much tougher thing to learn. So here we are with all these problems. And I know that's a long about way to get there, Japheth, but that's what the show's all about, is the long way there. So the reason we have red and blue is because the blue is undergoing a shift away from an industrial era, and the red never really got into the industrial era in the same way. The red is mostly open farmland. I'm doing enormous generalizations here, but the red basically is the country that was always here. The blue is the industrial era centers, which are dying and are going to die. And the reason they're going to die is because of shows like this one. I am sitting in a studio in Los Angeles, but I genuinely could be anywhere in the world with an internet connection. If I was in Antarctica and had a good internet connection, you would have no way of knowing. And furthermore, it wouldn't matter to you in the slightest. It just wouldn't matter whether I live in a city or not. So information age, you can scatter around the world. Industrial era, you have to have everything in one place. You can't have people making the bolts and the nuts in Cleveland and have have the people that are making the door handles in Arizona and try to put the car together. Sooner or later, all these things have to come together in one place. So, that's the fundamental divide, I think, is that the Democrats basically, well, I'll just call them the progressives. The Constitution, as written prior to the 16th Amendment, was pretty near perfect. I'm in favor of the amendment allowing women to vote, although I think the verdict is still out on that one, to be perfectly honest with you. And nevertheless, the things like the income tax and the 17th Amendment and all the rest are terribly destructive. And these are the progressive amendments. Abolition. We're going to ban alcohol. Why? Well, I'm not saying that drinking wasn't a problem on a farm, but you don't have time to be dead drunk on a farm every night. You're just not going to, you're going to starve. So in the cities, however, it was an enormous problem. And all these people work very hard, come home, and no real entertainment, certainly no affordable entertainment. They sit around, get drunk, and beat up their wives and kids. And so we're going to ban alcohol. How'd that work out? All of these are progressive amendments, and they're all brought into the mix by urban problems. And urban problems are centralized and vertical, and slow and stupid and expensive and clumsy. And did I mention expensive? So, again, Japheth, the only good news is we don't know what's going to happen. But we do know that that we don't know what's going to happen. That's the only thing we know. We are in uncharted waters, and humanity has never been here before. I certainly think the idea that the economy is rapidly diversifying to the point where really, you know, I could do virtually all of this. In fact, I could do this entire operation out of individual people's houses. And more that's getting to be the case. So the good news is that the internet is here, and if it hadn't been for the internet, you wouldn't be listening to me. I wouldn't be listening to you. I wouldn't be asking for memberships, and those of you that have answered the call wouldn't be paying them. And nevertheless, here we are. The future looks like this, and this is, I'll just close by saying this. This is the part that's hard for me to really not to understand, but just to believe emotionally. It's just a product of being, you know, raised. I spent 50 years watching television and thinking that in order to reach a lot of people, you needed things like very expensive lighting and expensive sets and $1 million cameras and producing staff of everything and everywhere. Did I say abolition? I meant to say prohibition. Thanks, Dave Big Booty. So I still like putting good graphics on the elements and stuff, but it's just not true. People would rather get it. The more I produce a segment, the fewer people watch it, because of the nature of the internet and its two-way communication, and the fact that there's no way anybody could afford to do a show, even if I was wildly famous. No one's going to give me 2 hours of airtime on Tuesday night on NBC to do this dog and pony show. So what we're finding out now as the economy changes is that this is the future. Shocking and depressing though that may be, the future looks like this. The future looks like Daily Wire podcasts and so on. And what we find is affinity is really what's driving things today. That's really where the market is. Since everything is so fractured, and there's so many different platforms, so many different programs, you simply can't put, 40 million eyeballs on one place anymore. So since the audience is fractured into millions of tiny bits, everybody looking for their own content, affinity is a big deal. Affinity is the degree of connection that the audience feels to the TV personality or host or star or whatever. And I am extremely proud to say that while we have nothing like the biggest audience out there, nothing like or anything like the biggest budget either. I have been told by 3 people who are simply social media analysts that that I have the highest affinity numbers they've ever seen, and that's largely due to you guys, to the Strata Loungers. You know, the loyalty and the connection is really tremendous, and I'd rather have that than any of the other 2, to be honest with you. So, Japeth, we got a lot of work to do, and we're trying to do it every day, and we're making a difference, because if there's absolutely no way Donald Trump would be president if it hadn't been for the internet. It's just no way. And there'd be no way we wouldn't be having discussions about fake news if it hadn't been for the internet. We would, because we had fake news for the last 50, 60 years and we didn't know it. Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, basically did a show one evening and said that we can't win in Vietnam. And the support for the war fell 40 points or something like that in the space of 2 days. And Walter Cronkite was a one-world socialist, and I saw him with my own eyes at the end of his life accepting an achievement award for a group of people who were internationalists, and Walter Cronkite said, it's going to be tough to get Americans to give up their sovereignty, but that's what it's going to take. This is the most trusted man in America basically saying to you that the entire idea of America is archaic and needs to be destroyed. So, yeah, of course it's fake news. They're deciding what we see and what we don't see, and if we had fair news, I'm looking forward to, and it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. As a matter of fact, I suspect it's actually quite possible. I'm looking forward to robotic news. I'm looking forward to artificial intelligence news that simply gathers stories, assembles them, and prints the facts. This is what is known. Somebody could provide that service, I think, as long as there were watchdogs on it, because somebody would, as long as you can provide it, somebody will try to cheat. But anyway, that's that. Hey, look, it's Dave Olson again. Is there any progress to report on big bat problems? In the spirit of the Cajun Navy, I think the time is ripe for sci-fi action adventure comedy drama about ordinary Americans as the good guys repelling an alien invasion with their own airplanes and ARs and pickup trucks and shotguns and bass boats and bagpipes and whatever else they can find. Dave, it's kind of a trick answer. It's a very straightforward question. So has there been progress on big bat problems? Yes and no. Has there been progress on the movie in terms of getting the movie closer to production? No. But there's been enormous progress on the Star Citizen thing, and I've said it before, the more I think about it, the clearer it gets. This ability to start out doing fictional 4 or 5 minute mini movies in this game world, science fiction movies, with a studio that costs $160 million, and Star Citizen is the largest crowdfunded project in history by a margin. So it is the perfect world between where I am and where I would like to be. It's a perfect world. It is precisely halfway between the political work I'm doing now and the feature film work I want to do in the future, which is also going to carry a message in a much more powerful way. It's going to carry a message that you not only don't see, but that you really enjoy and recommend to your friends and, go watch a couple times. So while nothing has gotten closer in terms of getting Big Bet Problems financed and started, a lot has happened getting closer to doing these little mini movies, which I realized, I don't know, we've been talking about this for 3 months now, maybe even a little longer. And in the discussions I've had with people, I have seen this kind of look from virtually everybody. And the look is kind of, maybe, Bill, maybe you just shouldn't, bet the whole farm on this. I mean, it sounds interesting and fun and all, but maybe you should. And that's when I realized that there was no way that I can explain this. And I just have to do one. So we're getting very close to doing one. Matt Lloyd, famed miscreant and degenerate, and Foghorn, also known as Viper Check, well-known braggart, loudmouth, and drunk, and I have been working on these things for, almost 2 months now. Matt and Foghorn have done a tremendous organizational job of breaking all this down, because we're talking about making a real economy and having real, well, I want accountants running our in-game business, and I want fighter pilots doing the in-game instruction, and I want I want people who are like these things in the real world. That's how we're going to get players. The more players we get, the more influence we have. The more influence we have, the more stories we can tell, the more movies we can make, these little mini movies, because I have learned what works and what doesn't on YouTube. And I have been talking to people for 10 years now at things like Tea Party rallies and Republican groups and stuff. And it's like, how can we get to young people? And it's gotten clearer and clearer to me that it doesn't matter what I talk about. It's still a 58-year-old guy in front of a green screen. And that's just not going to make the penetration. So these movies are not zero to produce, but we're talking thousands of dollars, not hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I was hoping to have that first demo done by the end of the month. It's possible, but we've had some delays, and the game has had a lot of delays. But in any event, the answer to your question, Dave, is that I have been, for 3 months now, doing an awful lot of things like graphic design, costume design. I've been working on props. I've been working on all kinds of things. We've been test flying. We've been test filming, trying to find out what we're capable of. The camera in the new version of the game coming up, which is supposed to have been coming up since I started in mid-May. It's supposed to have been right at the end of the month now for 4 months. But the new camera system will allow us to do a bunch of things that a little tough to do now. But we're going to do it. It's a little 4 or 5 minute mini movie, and it's got one point to it, and it's going to be me and Alfonso Rachel. And even if we don't do any more after that, that alone is going to be a lot of fun. Natasha is from a country where people don't don't dress up and play like 6-year-olds quite so often as we do here, and the look on her face sometimes when I come out in the latest version of the wetsuit, motorcycle armor, skydiving helmet, liquid cooled vest, plus plastic toy props and so on, is it's kind of a sad look. It's kind of a what have I done look. But in any event, we're going to go ahead and do it. So there we go. And Zoe's a good actor. He's a great actor, actually. And it's one of the things I'm most excited about is getting to work with him. And again, having a full tool set of things like music and villains and dialogue and all the rest of it. So that's what's going on with that, Dave. We're getting there. And by the way, one of the major reasons I'm doing this is because these little mini movies will be the director's reel that is going to put people over the top. I mean, they're not going to care whether or not these are real actors or virtual actors. If you show people a chase scene or a fight scene or something like that, it looks real enough to tell people, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing, or he doesn't. So there we go. All right, moving on. What a shame it's Matt Lloyd again. Bill, with technology today, you could certainly operate a low-budget hack operation like yours from anywhere in the U.S. with lower taxes and more business-friendly regulations. What keeps you in the Democratic People's Republic of California? The weather. Next question. I suppose I should say the climate. There's nothing like this place. And that's why we're so messed up. California is the most beautiful place I've ever seen, and it has, I think somebody said there were 3 places in the world with this kind of climate, where basically, yes, you burn a couple of months in the summertime, but by and large, even in the summertime, it gets down into the, low 70s, upper 60s, and the mountains and the ocean, and it's just spectacularly beautiful. And so everybody comes here for the beauty, and there's nothing here to shake out the idiots, and so they multiply. When there's no predators, the idiot population grows. And having no reality out here to thin the herd, the idiot population in California is just exponentially just skyrocketed. So, as a guy who spent 20 years of his life in Florida, I am never leaving this place. I could see myself moving to some places, and I thought I needed to be by the ocean, but I've come to realize I just need to be by a large body of water. A big lake would do it. Again, I'm here because this is, this, just off the top of my head, one night somebody asked me, I get asked that question every single speaking event I do, and one night I just said, if you're going to be a volcanologist, you got to live under the volcano, right? So that's why I live under the volcano. Cindy Lucin, who we haven't seen for a long time. Good to see you, Cindy. Says, when I try to have a discussion about immigration with leftists, they always bring up the idea that we are all immigrants and launch into a tirade about how the European settlers displaced the Native Americans. What is the best response to shut down that nonsense and drop a truth bomb into those murky waters? Tell people who call you an imperialist and a fascist and a racist and all the rest, when people talk about immigration, say, listen, it's very simple. I'll tell you what immigration policy I would like. I would like to have Mexico's immigration policy. I'd like to have it verbatim. Just that, there you go. It's done. It's over. I'd like Mexico's immigration policy. I think if America had Mexico's immigration policy, we'd be fine. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you're an illegal immigrant into Mexico, it's a felony. You're immediately deported or jailed. It means that you constantly have to check in, that Mexican authorities have to know where you are at all times. There's a number of other things. But one of the things that it means is that if you are caught just as a guest, if you are in Mexico and you are not a Mexican citizen and you are found involved with the politics of Mexico, if they see you at a protest or a demonstration, anything like that, you're out of here. You're gone. Yeah, I want Mexico's policy. Mexico's southern border is extremely well patrolled. And here's some news. I didn't know this until I started looking this up. In fact, this number is so shocking, I'm going to have to double or triple check this. We constantly talk about how horrible and racist in America is for not letting all these people in, but Mexico has about, if I get these numbers correctly, I think they have about 400 to 450,000 people coming into Mexico every year illegally from Guatemala to the south. Of that number, they catch about 175,000 of them and deport them immediately. Here's the thing that's just plain shocking. If it's so shocking, I still, as I say, I don't know if it's true. I gotta check it out. Of that 400,000 people that snuck into Mexico, well, let me back up. Last numbers we had are either 2015 or 16. They were able to count, I think it was 2016. They were able to count, that's right, Mexico's constitution forbids immigration policies from changing the country's demographics. Thanks a lot, Bone Canoe, appreciate that. Yeah, I'll take Mexico's policy. And then they're stuck, by the way, Cindy, right? What are they going to say after that? You talk about the white European settlers displacing the Native Americans and the Mexicans, the Spanish speakers and so on. Well, this is what the Spanish-speaking Mexicans do. This is their immigration policy. I'd like to have that. But here's the number. In 2016, I want to say it was something like 326 people died coming into America, either through dehydration or starvation or poisonous animals. Many of them murdered by the people who murdered and raped in many cases by the people who they paid a fortune to bring them into the country, the coyotes. So 326 people killed last year trying to get to America. And the number I saw, again, I simply can't believe it. The number I saw was this. The number of people who were killed last year trying to get into Mexico from Guatemala was 20,000 people. 20,000 people died in a year trying to get into Mexico. it kind of makes you wonder. Our border, the Mexican-U.S. border, is enormous. The southern border of Mexico is tiny. How do they have 20,000 people killed getting into Mexico on the southern border and 325 killed trying to get to America on this 2,000-mile border? How does that work? It seems to me that... excuse me for 1 second. Okay, it seems to me that we're not likely as racist or mean as they want us to think that we are. So that's what I would say, Cindy. Tell them you want Mexicans' immigration policy, and then tell them what Mexicans' immigration policy is, Mexico's immigration, and see what they say. Because I think it's another one of those, like Bernie has 3 houses, just a gobsmack, shut up, game over kind of an argument, which is why I'm happy to be on this side, by the way. That means I don't have to cover things like this up. I don't have to pretend that I believe in this socialist thing and then have 3 houses. I don't have to lie. It's tremendous. I'm trying to think of an example of that. It's like, if Ted Cruz voted for universal single-payer health care, I would stop being a Ted Cruz fan. But my politicians and I are in a line, and I say one thing and get to do the same thing. It's tremendous. Okay, moving on here. Let's see. That can't be right. Oh, okay. Merlin Wendelblow. Most amazing name ever in the history of the world, I think. So when Trump says he will utterly destroy North Korea, do you think he intends to install Hillary as president of North Korea, let her open their borders to Mexico, and enact all of her economic policies that would have devastated the U.S. if she had won here? Merlin, the North Korean people are the most long-suffering people on Earth by a wide margin. They are the most cruelly tortured people on the planet. Their government has made them starve to death and scratch around on the ground like chickens trying to find a kernel of corn, let alone an ear of corn. And I think people that brutalized, I think the last thing on earth that they need or deserve is to be ruled over by that harpy, narcissist drunk. Oh my God, Matt Lloyd again. Good God. Standards are falling rapidly here at the Stratosphere Lounge. Shania Twain wrote a song encouraging the listener to dance with the one that brought them and stick with the one that wants them. We brought the Republican Party to this dance, but when we catch them continuously making Faustian bargains with the Democrats, I don't believe they want us. Why should we stay? We should not stay. I'm done. I'm done. And this just tees off very briefly a much bigger discussion, and that is that I'm disgusted with the Republicans, just dead sick of them. As a conservative, there are progressives who are sick of the Democratic Party, and the middle of the country sits out there with no particular ideology, hates both of them. This is the kind of connects to what we were talking about in the beginning. The Republican and the Democratic Party are archaic and obsolete. The $20 trillion of spending is just, it's inconceivable. I do believe, as we mentioned before with Dave Rubin, I think that an American-loving liberal and an American-loving conservative could sit down with 10 of their fans on either side, and if everybody came into the room with goodwill, we'd have a platform that 85% of the American people would vote for in a heartbeat. Because we'd all agree that we're not evil, they're not stupid. We want people to be happy. They want people to be happy. Now let's use our reasoning abilities and find out the best way for that to happen. So yeah, I'm done. I don't know what the alternative is, but this business of not repealing Obamacare was really, to say it's the last straw is just nuts. It's the only straw. That's why we were doing what we're doing. That's why the Tea Party existed. I gave, I don't know, 50 speeches maybe to Tea Party groups, ranging from maybe 10,000 in a public square to 2 people in a no joking now, 2 people in the back of a, it wasn't a Denny's, was it? It might have been. So, you know, they're just horrible people. There's something about the kind of person that determines that they want to go into politics that's just a terrible, terrible person. And it's a very poor motivational core in terms of their values. And of all the things I've seen in the Obama era, the one thing that I saw that I think bothered me more than anything I saw during those 8 years was the look on John McCain's face when he went in to cast that deciding vote in order to not repeal Obamacare. That little smug, I'm the maverick and nobody knows what I'm going to do. This is the guy who said that Barack Obama would make a perfectly good president. Well, then why don't you vote for him, John, and get the hell out of the way? Because some people didn't think so. That, you know, there's so many stories of McCain basically giving up 6 weeks before. He was, once he picked Sarah Palin, he was ahead. And he stayed ahead until he suspended his campaign because of the financial crisis. But many people said that McCain said, I'm not going to be the person to stand in the way of America's first black president. Which is fine, John. You know, that's fine. I don't agree with it. I don't find that a particularly noble position, but you're welcome to your opinion. But if that is going to be your policy, you might want to tell the Republicans who are lined up to vote for you that you're not in the fight anymore and that you don't really have the stomach for the fight or the patience or the will or the desire. You think that the moral alternative to you winning is better than you winning. You might have told us that, because we could have found somebody who would have fought a little bit harder. So, yeah, that McCain look, that just that smile, that little smile on the face of this dinosaur. Was it 26 years for McCain or something like that? I'm embarrassed I voted for him. I really am. So, yeah, I'm with you. Let's just... at this point, I'm just going to go with individual candidates. They're almost all going to be Republicans because that's how the pachinko balls fall. But it's time for a new party, and I think a new party would catch on like wildfire, if you basically took all the pieces that make up the Republicans and the Democrats and you put the red pieces and the blue pieces, dumped them out on a table, and just took the colors off of everything, you'd come out with a purple that would appeal to everybody. And I mean appeal to strict conservatives, as well as appeal to fanatical liberals. Now, you're going to find 15% on both extremes that, you know, convince you're either a communist or a robber baron or whatever. But those unreasonable people need mental help and they can't be reached anyway. Another half hour, maybe, something like that. Ryan Castle. I've been pretty amused by the left's fascination with Harry Potter, and J.K. Rowling has certainly made her leftist opinion known to Twitter. My question is why she doesn't call for wand control in her books. After all, they are dangerous and can kill, just like guns. Is Harry Potter so popular because it demonstrates the truth about human nature, even if the author doesn't recognize it? That's a great point. And there's two things to say about this. One of the reasons that I'm so excited about doing these movies in the Star Citizen game world is because all of these young progressive socialists who've been socialized since birth, who've been told that guns are horrible and that gun control is the only solution, in this game, they're going to be armed to the teeth. They're going to be armed to the teeth. Everybody in this universe is armed to the teeth. Call of Duty and, you know, and all of these things are about being armed. And even the morally reprehensible games like Grand Theft Auto, it's a handy thing to have. But in this world, everybody is armed. You before you walk out to your airlock to get into your spaceship, there is a spacesuit store and there's a weapons store, and you can go in and buy 2 different weapons or 4 or whatever now. And when the game breaks into 3.0, you're going to be able to buy 50 of them. One of the most fun things about the game is arming your particular fighter. What is the best loadout combination? Missiles, what kind of guns, energy weapons, ballistics, whatever. And so here are these people who've been told that guns are horrible and useless, and they're blowing each other away. Now, somebody has to point this out to them. But somebody has to do it in such a way that the obvious response is defeated. The obvious response is, yeah, Bill, we know that everybody's shooting a gun because that's a game. It's not real. Well, you're wrong. The entire idea of these kind of games, these kind of first-person immersive games, is you are a person. And the reason you're armed is because you don't want your character to get killed. So it's reality once removed, but it's the same reality. Why do you carry a gun? Why are you armed? Well, because if I go over to, what's the name of that? Convolect shipping hub or something, there are pirates out there. And if I don't have at least a rifle, I haven't got a chance against them. No fooling. Why don't you send them a strongly worded message? Why don't you get on the chat system and inform them that you're a swell guy and you think pirates are fine, you got nothing against them, just like to be left alone? And they know that that won't work. They know. And so they know that it won't work in the real world either. Somebody has to point these things out to them. This is why I'm so excited about it. Because this is the kind of judo that I'd like to be doing. I've been fighting this fight for 9 years now. More than that. Well, way more than that. 12, 13 years starting with the writing. And the entire time, you and me, all of us, all of the conservatives have been standing on the beach with these waves coming in. We're up there up to our knees, then our waist, then our shoulders, then our neck in water. And these waves just keep bashing us in the face. And we just have to stand there and try and stop this tide. We're sitting simply trying to stop this tide, this flow. And the essence of judo is not that judo was invented so that a little man could beat a big man. And so the people who invented judo understood that the little man is not going to be able to overpower the big man. He simply can't just stand there and face this guy like sumo wrestlers. He's a little guy, the other guy's a big guy. So how do you beat a big guy? How do you do it? And the essence of judo is you use their own strength against them. You don't have the strength to stand there and stop a big guy who's coming at you, but you do have the ability, if you practice, to get slightly out of the way when he runs at you. And then just by a little bit of applied pressure, all of a sudden he's on the ground. You're using your opponent's momentum and strength against them. And instead of staring into this endless sea of waves, you're surfing, you're going the other way. You're using the power of the culture behind you instead of in front of you. So when I stand up and do a firewall about gun control or whatever, I'm a conservative white guy, and I make a good argument, but most people just see the beginning of that, and they're not going to listen to the argument, not going to watch the argument. But everybody's playing these games, and everybody that is playing the games are armed. And so if they're armed, there's nobody protesting. Nobody goes into these games. I'm not saying everybody in the world plays these games, but nobody goes into a computer game, buys a computer game, and calls themselves a video gamer. None of these people, they may in the real world be big supporters of gun control, but none of them are. You don't play Call of Duty where you're either in World War I or World War II, the newest versions, or you're in present day in Iraq, or you're in the future. All of these things are shooters. It's called a first-person shooter for a reason. Castle Wolfenstein, you're stuck in this maze filled with Nazis, and the first thing you have to do is get a pistol. And this is flow. This is energy flow. This is chi, although I don't know enough really about it. But that's what it is. It's chi, and I'm tired of fighting against the chi. I want to use the momentum of people's pre-existing actions, and then just get slightly out of the way and just apply a tiny little bit of pressure in a very precise way and let their entire momentum take them where I want them to go. They're playing games, they're shooting, they're armed, they like it, and they understand why they're armed. They understand that because it's a game, this is the interesting point. I haven't really thought about this before, to be honest with you. Because it's a game, people get to act out on their innermost id pressures. Sometimes people in a game just like to go shoot people because they want to know what it feels like to be the bad guy. But because it's a game, the reality of aggression comes out, and so you can say to somebody, well, why did you go into this particular starport or something armed? Well, because there are people there trying to kill me. Okay, so why don't you just call the police? They would look at you and laugh. They would look at you and laugh, and they would say, call the police. The police isn't going to get here for 30 minutes. And it says true everywhere in the country they're not going to get here for 30 minutes. Even if they get here for 6 minutes, they're going to be 5 minutes and 59 seconds too late. So why do you bring a gun? Why not just call the police? And they're not going to have an answer because it's going to sound absurd to them. And all of a sudden, it's like the same. One of the examples of this kind of judo that is so powerful is the thing I did, which I've just beaten into the ground. But that whole thing about, students with cell phones, is socialists with cell phones. Well, if you're a socialist, then, sell the phone and give it to the poor. That's what you say you're for. So redistribute some wealth. Go and liquidate your Xbox. And they can't respond to that. There's no response to it. That's judo. That's using people's behaviors to point out the contradictions between what they say and what they do. And then you get to step into that space and say, what you do is the stuff that makes sense. What you say is the stuff that you say because other people think that if you say those things, you're going to be a better person. But it's not true. And it's not true because you are doing what you know to be right. And so are people like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has 3 houses because Bernie Sanders is famous and Bernie Sanders has power. He has his ability to draw people. I'm not going to say that he deserves those. You know what? I am. He does deserve 3 houses. Actually, I think his philosophy is evil, and I think he's a terrible man, horrible man. But without question, Bernie Sanders is worth enough money to be able to buy a 6-figure house, even if the reason he's worth 6 figures is because of his constant ability to denigrate people who make 6 figures or 7 or 8. So in any event, there we go. Let's see. Oh, look, it's a Tiemens. Isaac Tiemens. Hello, Tiemens is Team-I. Haven't seen a Tiemens in a little while. Bill, when you watch the news and you see Heritage America increasingly displaced by the Janissary armies of the Third Worldist Progressive Alliance, when monuments and memorials to American heroes are vandalized, desecrated, and destroyed, and each day the anarcho-tyranny sets in just a little harder, the low-level civil war gets a little bit hotter, is it feeling like Red 17? Oh, thank you. Red 17 was, that's I got to tell you, a little crazy. When I was first talking about the idea of the common sense resistance and the basic outlines of the story about how America is socialized and is in ruins, and there's a pirate organization of people called the Common Sense Resistance, and they do a flashback because that was set probably in 2030 or 2040, somewhere around in there. And they talk about the horrors of Red 17, which was 2017 was the year everything collapsed and came down. And here it is. We're almost out of it, really. And turns out, I knew when I said it that there was not enough time, that it was going to prove itself crazy short. But I'm glad you reminded me of it, because sometimes you do have to be shaken by the collar and realize you got to give yourselves a lot more time than this. For those of you Lost in Space fans, the Jupiter 2 took off, I want to say 1998 or 1997. The little one-man saucer from the show that was made in 1964, 65, 66, somewhere in there. They thought, at what point in the future will people be able to go between the stars in a ship the size of essentially a Winnebago? So this is 64, let's say. Oh, let's set it way in the future. How far? Crazy far. Really? Yeah. 30 years from now, let's say. So in 1997, the Robinson family, or 98, whatever it is. And people thought, well, in 1998, my God, we'll be a piece of cake by then. Nope. Depressing, really. By the way, my right angle this week is one of my all-time favorites. It's about, well, it's using the end of the Cassini mission just as a launch platform into this golden age of astronomy, where people like me who are interested in astronomy lived in a unique time in human history. And when I say unique, I mean not only has it never happened before, it will not happen again. That's something quite considerable. The short form on that is, when I started being interested in astronomy, the best pictures we had of the planets were taken from big telescopes, and they were very blurry, although we didn't know it at the time. You get a good telescopic image of Jupiter, and you could clearly see the bands in the red spot, the wide bands and the little specks of the moons and everything. And so when I started being interested in all this stuff, there were no pictures of any of it. We didn't know what Mercury looked like, didn't know what Venus looked like. Mars, we'd had a couple of blurry pictures from flybys, and I wanted to see all this stuff, and I got to watch it all. It took 40 years, 50, something like that, 40. I watched Pioneer go to Jupiter and take a picture of Jupiter that at the time was just unbelievably beautiful and gorgeous. You look at a Pioneer image of Jupiter now, and you just stunning. And so you keep getting gobsmacked. You keep getting blown away. So we saw Pioneer's vision of Jupiter, and several years later we saw Voyager's vision of Jupiter, and that was mind blown again. And we never knew what asteroids looked like. Finally, Mariner 9 shows us some pictures of Phobos and Deimos in orbit around Mars, and we think they might look something like that. Turns out they look exactly like that. And we did some missions. I guess the first one was, maybe it was Galileo or one of the comet missions. In any event, we start getting a look at these asteroids. Then we're orbiting Eros for a year, and I'm looking at pictures that are taken, a mile above the surface, and count individual boulders the size of a coffee table, and was, unbelievable. And it kept coming. And then so Cassini, obviously, I think it was 14 years in orbit, and 6 years to get there. Puny Earthmen. We could have been to Saturn in 2 weeks if we'd had a little muscle behind us. We launch it, and then we're going to have to do a gravity assist with the Earth. It's going to be in orbit around the sun for 2 years or whatever it is, and then it's going to swing by Earth, and Earth's gravitational speed is going to speed it enough to swing by, Jupiter or whatever. These are just, it takes 7 or 8 years to get to the outer planets because you're not serious. New Horizons was serious about getting to Pluto. They got to Jupiter in, 4 months, something like that? Less? It's like, oh, here's Jupiter. Oh, okay, that was cool. And so the New Horizons pictures from Jupiter were amazing. And then now we have Galileo, terrific. And now we have Juno. And I saw pictures of Jupiter taken 2-3 days ago. And again, I'm just completely blown away. I simply can't believe it. It's just unreal. So the reason it's a unique moment in time is because people who were born before me and died before me wanted to know what these things look like for thousands of years, well, hundreds of years with a telescope anyway, wanted to know, what does the surface of Mars really look like? Are there canals there? Are there people, little green men there? And this was something that was thought about by generations of people who had no way of knowing the answer. So I got to see this. But what makes it unique is people who are born now are never going to know what it was like to not know. The first pictures they see of Mars are going to be taken from Curiosity rover. And the first pictures they see of Saturn are going to be taken by Cassini. And Pluto's not a mystery planet. It's not, what is it going to look like? We know exactly what it looks like. It's a hideously ugly planet, by the way. There's something about that combination of pink and tan. It is a disgusting, horrible looking place. So here we sit. We sit in this age. Same thing with computers. I remember a world before computers. And I get to see, what is it? I always get these mixed up. Is it Godwin's Law? Goodwin's Law? Or is that the one about the Nazis? In any event, I got to watch, I started with a computer that had 64 kilobytes of memory, and I thought I was king of the world. And now, we're dealing with terabytes of memory, and I got to see the whole thing. People prior to this life never experienced the computers at all. People coming after us have known nothing but computers, and so they're not blown away by the constant improvements in things like graphics and stuff. Well, not the way I am anyway. So there you go. Pluto sucks. Deserves to be demoted. It's a horrible place. Terrible, wretched place. Let's see. I think maybe we'll do 1 or 2 more at the most. Chris Taylor, would you consider revisiting your Bill Scouts ideas for use inside Star Citizen to provide standards and advancement criteria inside your Star Citizen organization? Imagine a homebody gamer screwing up his courage to take an introductory glider flight at his local airfield because he wants to be a squadron commander in the game, or some 13-year-old kid in Gainesville being mentioned on team leadership 5 paragraph order briefings and raid planning by a 22-year-old Marine at Okinawa to standards that were developed by a veteran Navy SEAL. That's a great question, Chris. And it goes deeper than that. Not only do I want to use the game, we are going to... I didn't write the questions, folks, so if you're one of these people who thinks Star Citizen is boring, I'm sorry, I'm just reading the questions in order. There are organizations already, hundreds, 600, 700 of them, and the game hasn't really even come out yet. Honestly, they're still pre-alpha testing. But there are hundreds of organizations, pirate organizations, mercantile organizations, exploration guilds, and some vague political alliances. And they're going to attract certain kind of people. The kind of people we're going to attract are a very, very small percent of that, because the primary thing that we're looking for is discipline. You get somebody gets into a game like that, where you basically can just, if you've got a little cash, you can find yourself in the most advanced of these space fighters and put whatever weapons you want on it and so on. But we're looking for people who are willing to work their way up through the ranks, which means that if you want to be a fighter pilot in this game, you got to start out by being a third officer on a freighter. And if you do a good job there, you get to 53,000 organizations. Sorry about that, Foghorn. 53,000 organizations. That's just organizations. We're going to end up taking over all of them. It's because we're going to build America in space. That's what this whole idea is very simple. It's how do you build America in space? Because if you can build America in space 1,000 years from now, you can show people what the country's made out of and how it works. That's the whole plan. That's it. It's very simple. We're just going to show people who don't know a jack about this country and how the country was formed and why. We're going to build America in space in front of their eyes. We're going to do it by making the best of these little movies, fan films that are out there. I think it's just bloody brilliant. It's what I do think. But it's deeper than that, because, Chris, it's not just that they can be exposed to real-world training and maybe they'll go and get a real glider ride. I find that a little unlikely. Some people might. But since the whole thing is done in character, or most of it anyway, I think it's a little bit unlikely. But we're not just going to do things like teach them air-to-air tactics, and we're not just going to not just going to teach them about history and things like the thatch weave and how these Greek hoplites who were farmers defeated the most experienced, glorious warriors that the East had. Farmers just kicked their asses for 400 years. Why? They're going to learn those things, and that's cool. But they're also going to learn about things like character. They're going to learn about character. They're going to learn about right and wrong. They're going to be father figures in this, and they're going to be people who do the right thing and people who don't do the right thing. And there's a funny thing about being an instructor, like a flight instructor. People basically pay you to give them your advice. And while you may be giving them advice on stall speeds and aerodynamics, they can often take your advice on other things as well. And so we're going to ask for discipline. And there's very few people out there with discipline, but with something like 2 million people already signed up, I'll take 1% of 1%, because we need discipline in order to win. I spend a lot of time out there practicing, and way too much time, I guess. But I have to practice because I have to be relatively good at this. But I will never, ever be as good as some 14-year-old who spends 7 hours a day in there. That's all they do. I'll never be as good as that kid. Never, ever, ever. And I know it for an absolute fact, because they clean my clock all the time. Just go in there by myself and I just get my butt handed to me. In a room full of 10 players, 20 players, if I really apply myself, I can usually come in third, maybe second, but that's unusual. Third, fourth, fifth, somewhere in there. out of 15 or 20. That's not bad for a 58-year-old guy. But we'll never be better than those guys. And so in the movie segment, we've got a class full of young pilots who wish they were somewhere else, wish they were out in the fleet, wish they were in the newest equipment. They're not. They're stuck in the worst place in the universe, in a backwater, in literally 100-year-old vehicles. And the first thing they get as their first briefing is their commander comes in and says, here's the situation right now. You're only here because you're the bottom of the class. The best guys went to the fleet. But even if the best guys were here, here's the reality. We're outnumbered. The people who we are fighting against have better equipment than we do. They have more of it, and they're better pilots than we are. Mumble, mumble, grumble, grumble. But it's true. And this is what I mean by building America in space. This is just a small example of what I mean by this. So, now you've got a bunch of people who are utterly demoralized. They were demoralized when they got their assignment. They think this commander of theirs is a complete defeatist and a loser. And he shows them that he's right. And so now you're stuck with the problem. And the problem is, how do you beat superior numbers of better trained people with better equipment? It seems impossible. And it is impossible, except that it's done. It's been done before. It was done in the Pacific. And this is where the power of this idea starts to take place. Because I can have this guy who's doing a briefing set 1,000 years in the future, say, point to a picture of a guy in khaki shirt and a leather helmet, and say, we are going to survive and win out here because of this guy who lived 1,000 years ago in 1942. And his name is, I can't remember, is it John Thatch, James Thatch? I forget his first name, but believe me, I will get it right. His name is Thatch. And at the beginning of World War II, he was an American naval aviator, and he was up against the Japanese, who had more planes, better planes, and pilots with a lot of experience. And we were getting massacred by them. Massacred. And how do you beat them? You can't beat them. Well, Thatch just decided, well, maybe you can. What if we operate in teams? What if we have one guy who's doing a pursuit this way and another guy who's doing a pursuit that way? And every time they come around like this, it sets up a crossing shot on the Japanese pilot. And if he breaks one way after the lead, that means that his wingman will be in perfect trailing position for a kill shot. It was called the Thatch weave, and he showed people how to do it with matchsticks on the wings of airplanes. And once they started doing the Thatch weave, they started kicking the Japanese butts. They just knocked them out of the sky. Knocked them out of the sky because of the discipline and the tactical genius of it. John Thatch, thanks, buddy. That's interesting. And it's interesting to people who want to play this game. It's interesting to people because in this game now, it's not going to be a reboot. If you get killed, you get killed. And your character, all the stuff he loses is gone. And it's kind of like a Dungeons & Dragons thing where people had characters that they played for 10, 15 years. And sometimes that character would get killed. In the game killed, obviously. And they would go through a state of complete depression and mourning. This person, they've experienced a number of things through the eyes of that person's gone. So, not everybody can be the best fighter pilot out there, and since not everybody can be the best fighter pilot out there, people are going to want to know, how do you beat the best fighter pilots out there? Well, you beat them by teamwork. But the only way you can achieve this is through extremely rigid discipline. And that gives me a chance as a writer. It gets me fired up as a writer. It gives me a chance to talk about John Boyd and about John Thatch. And it gives me a chance to talk about why the Hoplites beat the Persians through cooperation. And I had a great example. What was it? Just flew right out of my head. Just give me 1 second here. It'll come back. Basically, I remember. So this squadron commander that I'm going to play, because nobody else can do it, can't afford him, basically says, we are in this squadron, regardless of what happens out in the rest of the Navy, you're not going to paint kills on your aircraft. You're not going to get to paint kill signs like Japanese meatballs or German crosses or whatever. We're not going to do that here. However, We are going to keep very, very strict score of what the squadron achieves. What is the squadron's score? Because what I've realized from spending hours and hours and hours out there fighting these people in simulation is that since they're better than we are, the only way for us to survive is, as I say, through discipline. And that means that you have to train up to go against your very instincts. Now, Foghorn Viper Check has said it many times. It's an old saw. It's absolutely true. The primary quality you're looking for in a fighter pilot is aggressiveness. The second quality that you'd like to have is aggressiveness, and third quality, most important of all, is aggressiveness. You cannot survive in a dogfight situation. You cannot survive aerial combat if you are not constantly on the offensive. If you are not willing to turn into those guys and shoot down every single one of them, you are not made out of the stuff that you need in order to do this particular job. Maybe you're better suited as a submarine commander who has pretty much the opposite motivation. That guy needs to be a ninja and a hunter, and he needs to have the patience of Job and just wait till he gets into a perfect kill shot, and that's what a submarine commander does. But a fighter pilot goes and turns into the fight all the time because you are either on the offensive or you're on the defensive. And if you're on the defensive, it's just a matter of time. So this is kind of thing I'm talking about. He's going to say, we're not going to put individual kills on your aircraft, because if we do, we're rewarding individual kills. And we're not doing that here. What we're rewarding is squadron kills, and what we're really rewarding is, does everybody come back? If you lose a wingman, that's going to be worse than being killed. I'll shoot you myself. If you come back with a wingman, without a wingman, and a damn good reason, you're done. Your mission is not to kill other people. Your mission is to come back with your wingman. And if you can kill enemies while doing that, that's just swell. So here's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about fighting instincts, the aggression instinct. You're in this battle and everything's going on and you're just completely adrenalized and you're moving sideways and upside down and backwards and you're taking damage, you're dishing out damage. And finally, you've got somebody in your sights and you're putting rounds on this person and you just keep putting rounds on them. And it's called target lock, and it's almost impossible to break. I need another 3 seconds and this guy's dead. Well, another 3 seconds, your wingman is dead. Do you have the discipline to break off of a shot like that and go rescue this other guy? Well, if you don't, then you're going to lose. He'll die first, you'll die next. You have to have the discipline, the mental discipline, to give up on that and realize that everything that you're motivated to do, which is get individual kills, because that's why people do it, because it's fun, just physically fun shooting things down in simulators. You have to not only resist that temptation, you have to overcome it. And you have to make sure that your mission is to make sure that your wingman doesn't get killed, and his mission is to make sure you don't get killed. And we have done it a couple of times, Matt and Foghorn and I. And when I say a couple of times, I mean 2 times. But what we found was we can beat the best pilots out there working as a 2-man or a 3-ship operation. We've proven it. People we never could beat before, who would just beat us, whip us silly. When we're working together, we can beat those guys. And the reason it works is because we're talking. They can't hear us talking. I say, Matt, let's pick up, whatever, Turbo Dan or whatever his on-screen call sign is. Well, let's go get this guy. Yeah. Now, the best enemy pilot that's out there is, Foxyman 2209. And so while we're trying to get relatively easy kills by working together, whenever we see Foxyman coming back into the fight, we immediately break off of that and we start to engage Foxyman. And Foxyman is going to go after one of us. And if it's just him and me, I'm going to die. There's no question about it. I'm going to get killed. He's going to get me every single time. And I know this because I keep turning into that fight and I keep going after this guy and they keep blowing me up. And I'm too stupid to learn. And it's almost impossible to not turn into that fight if you're built the way I'm built. When this guy comes by and you're in the merge and now all of a sudden you're merged and then it's a question of who's got the best position, that natural aggressiveness of mine is almost insurmountable. It's almost impossible for me to break away from that fight. Every time I turn into the fight, I lose. Every single time I lose. Taco Bell is a guy. Yeah, thanks, Viper. That's really particularly good. So what we learned is we can go out there, team up 2-on-1 on relatively inexperienced enemy pilots and knock them out of the sky. terrific. We're thinning the herd and we're eliminating potential threats that will be harassing threats while we're dealing with the real people. But when the enemy aces come out, when their good guys come out, then we are very simply doing one thing and one thing only. I'm going to get into a fight with this guy, and the second he turns into fight with me, you just blast him and keep blasting him, and I'm going to simply get out of the way. I'm not going to try and outturn this guy. I'm just going to get out of the way, and you keep putting rounds on this guy until he turns to fight you. And once he turns to fight you, you get the hell out of the way, and I'm going to come in, and I'm going to put some rounds on this guy. And it works. It works. And if it didn't work, I'd still make it work in the fictional movies, but it's nice that it actually works. This will appeal. Foghorn is talking about a guy named Taco Bell. He was listening to me ranting and raving for 4 or 5 minutes or something. It's me and Foghorn and Matt Lloyd out there. And he just wrote, I still want a piece of him. I do too. I want to go right now. I want to go find him, and I want to go blow his ass up 20 or 30 times consecutively because I owe him that. These are the kind of things that are interesting to me. Do you have the discipline to go for the win? Because civilization is about going for the long-term win. Civilization is about cooperating to achieve a goal that you could not achieve by taking the immediate gratification. And if you can teach that, you're winning the culture war. And if you can play a game that has 3 or 4 million players and you can come out on top of it by admitting that we are nothing like the best players out there, but we're going to beat the best players out there. And here's how. Now you've got people who are interested, and they're not just interested in the game playing aspect, although that's certainly the hook and the draw. That's what's pulling them in and keeping them in, is they want to do better in the game. But it's impossible to learn these things and not get the larger lesson. It's not possible. You have to get the larger lesson. So I'm real excited about it. And I completely understand people who don't get it. I've explained this to 25 people probably on and off in various degrees of, including Stratosphere loungers. And virtually everybody just looks at me with this blank expression and says either this is boring or I don't know what you're doing, but for God's sakes, don't give up your day job. And I realized I know what it looks like and I can explain it to myself, but I understand that nobody else knows what this is, so I just have to do one. I just have to do one. If we can find 16-year-old males who are willing to give up these prime seats on fighter planes and take jobs as third officers where the entire purpose of the mission is for nothing to happen. That's the goal. The goal is to get this transport from point A to point B with nothing happening. The good mission, the kind of mission we want, is a mission where we don't see anybody. The kind of person that will do that is the kind of person we're looking for. And I'm going to just go into one more little bit of the weeds with the geekiness, and then I might do one more just to get the Star Citizen taste out of the mouth of those of you not interested. This is a minor point, but it's a very important point. And I got to just give you a little tiny bit of the physics. So these spacecraft can fly in 2 different modes. There's a coupled mode where basically the thrusters on the ship are behaving in such a way to make it fly like an airplane, a real simple to fly airplane. You pull back on the throttle, the thing stops. You push on the throttle, it goes forward. You turn left, you turn right, it banks into the turn, flies just like an airplane, except it can stop on a dime. Well, that's the flight system, the computers on board the ship, making the ship behave in such a way that it's easy for a person to fly. But you can decouple the ship, which now means that you can be going forward in one great old direction. And when you turn, instead of the ship turning, you keep going on that vector and the ship just turns around and now the nose is pointing backwards and you see these reference lines coming from behind you. And that's how the physics of the thing in the real world actually work in decoupled mode, where the rotation of the vehicle is independent of the vector of the vehicle. And so when I spent the first month or so on this thing, I would go in and land. And it basically means you come in, you stop, and then you kind of go down and you stop and just look crummy. And then I realized, what would it look like if you did a decoupled landing? And then your approach to this tiny little landing pad has got to be forward vectors, down vectors, slight right vector to correct right, pitch up the nose, You're still on this vector down. Every time you cut your forward velocity, your downward vector increases because that downward component hasn't been touched. And after a while, and I mean a short while for me because I've had a lot of experience with this. After a while, I was making landings with this thing, and if you looked at them from the outside, because you can, that looks like an actual spaceship landing on a pad. It looks exactly like that. And that was so exciting to me. I was so completely impressed by how good it looked, by how real it looked, that it gave me a tremendous jolt. Hey, Billy, see you later. Tremendous jolt. Just watching it, it's like, damn, that's really good. So what's the point of all this? Well, the point is there's an automated landing system in the game that a lot of people use. And then there's the easy-to-use method that I'd used forever. Almost impossible to screw that up. But it's going to be a requirement for us that everybody does a decoupled landing. And the reason is because it looks good and it takes skill. It's hard. It's really hard. You're dealing with, 3 different axes of motion, and they're all independent of each other, and it looks great. So we're going to basically say, hey, kids, we know that you've got 400 kills already, or 4,000 kills, or 40,000 kills. Now you're going to sit in the co-pilot seat of this big clunky freighter, and we're going to teach you how to land the hard way. And they're going to go, why? And I'm going to say, because if you understand this, you will then, in your bones, understand what fighting in space is really all about. Plus, it looks cool. So there you go. I'll do one more because I didn't want to end on Star Citizen, but I'm very excited. And by the way, the game has been delayed for 3 or 4 months, but what we're seeing is it's indescribable. It's indescribable how freaking amazing it is. Absolutely, absolutely breathtaking. What you can do and how good it looks. Breathtaking. Parenthetically, I was planning on doing live actors and compositing them into this thing because I did not have the means of doing the facial capture animation and all the rest of it and syncing it up and so on. And then we saw a demo where basically you take a webcam like this. Essentially, it's the Stratosphere Lounge. And they've got guys have come up with software that's looking at the position of my eyes, my head, my chin, my mouth, all of it. I'm not having to wear reference dots like they used to because the software doesn't need them anymore. It's just got the computing horsepower to say those are his eyes, that's his nose, there's his chin. And they've done demonstrations of this where I am on a webcam and I go, hey man, and you don't even have to be that big. You just go, wow. And that webcam decodes the facial positions of mine, translates it onto my in-game character, and that character is speaking, and not only is my voice coming out of him, but all the facial expressions are they're not perfect, but they're very, very good. So I may be obsolete as an actor in this, although I suspect not, because there's a quality to the live action that's really sets it apart. There's a lot of people making these machinimas, which are where you take game footage and record it, and they're action sequences because they have to be, because you're dealing with computer-generated characters. I want to do a combination of that, and I also want to do something more like a fan film. And if you look at fan films, you look at some of these Star Trek original series things on the web, and these bridge sets are indistinguishable from the original series show because they're built from the same plans. The lighting and the costumes are indistinguishable from the original series, except that it looks better only because it's on HD or 4K. The special effects are better. It looks like the old Enterprise, and the phaser effects look like old optical things, but it looks as good as anything, and it costs them nothing because they love it. They build these things in their own time, and the payoff is you get to be in a red shirt walking down the halls, the curvy halls. And those fan films are the emotional tone I'm going for. I'm going to have to use some of the game capture footage technology, but I'm convinced I can do it because I know what I'm doing with those kind of things and finally get a chance to stretch a little bit. All right, here we go. Last one. All right, Steve Darrow. Did I just pick a novel here? No, it's not too bad. Okay, Steve writes, of these, which is the most damaging lie progressives tell? Bullet points. A price-coordinated market economy is just another ism that can be replaced? Or wealth and income is unfairly distributed among classes and genders, or all non-progressives are just hate-filled, racist, sexist, bigot homophobes, or are there other lies that you would add? Well, they're all good. I think probably the most damaging lie is, certainly to me, is this whole, if you disagree with me, you're a racist thing. It's, you know, I'd love to tell you I'm over it, but I'm not. I don't think I'll ever get over it. So that aspect of it, and we did a segment this morning on Grant's show where there were third graders, 8-year-old boys playing football, playing just Pee-wee League football, 8-year-old boys, not standing up for the national anthem now because they saw it on NFL TV, and the NFL guys are not doing it because they buy this narrative that blacks are being just murdered indiscriminately in this country by whites and getting away with it. So you see 8-year-olds taking a knee for something you don't even understand. It's heartbreaking. That's a very damaging lie. But if I could convince people of one thing, it would be, I would show them how wealth is created. Because if you can convince people that wealth can be created and that it's not a zero-sum game, then everything they believe falls apart. If I can convince people that you can either work hard or smart or both and make something that wasn't there before, then what I'm doing is I'm proving to people that it's not like somebody got a bigger slice of the pie than you got. We don't have to divide the pie. In order for me to get more pie, I don't have to take pie away from you. I can go bake more pies and make as many damn pies as I want to, be swimming in pie if I want to, because I can make as many pies as I'd like. And the entire history of this country is that we just bake more pies. That's all we do. Instead of looking at other people and envying them and wishing we had their stuff and trying to take away their cow, we just say to ourselves, okay, well, what do you do to get a cow? You have to do this. You have to work hard. Great. If I work twice as hard, does that mean I get 2 cows? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. I'm in. And now the idiot's son-in-law has a job, and off we go. So I would try to convince people that you can create wealth and that wealth is not limited. And then I would point out to people who are obsessed with income inequality, obsessed with the idea that somebody makes $8 an hour and somebody else makes $800 an hour and somebody else makes $8 million an hour, and how unfair that is. I would point to the fact that if you look at income inequality, it's pretty perfectly coordinated with outcome inequality. Output inequality, I should say. You'll find that the people who are making the most money are the people who are producing the most value towards society, because money doesn't care who owns it. Money doesn't care. Doesn't care if you're Beyonce, doesn't care if you're Warren Buffett. Money goes to where the need is. And that's all money is. It's a way to fulfill needs. And if you can create a need, you're going to get money. And if you understand that, then you realize that it's not like the wealth fairy flew low over the land and tapped a few lucky individuals and made them rich. And not only are they rich, they're rich because they took stuff away from somebody else. It's not true. It's not true. The amount of money that I make here or don't make here does not influence whether or not a single mom gets a check. As a matter of fact, the more money I make, the more taxes I pay. And the more taxes I pay, the more money that person makes. I think it's a catastrophe, but it is in fact true. And by the way, that's an American term, I think, certainly used by Americans, and nobody understands the power of it. We've said it our entire lives without understanding the power of it. What are you going to do? I'm going to go out and make some money. You're going to what now? I'm going to go make some. You mean you're going to go steal some? No. You're going to go take some from somebody who has more than you do? No. I don't understand. I'm going to go make some. I'm going to go make some money. It's time to make some money. They can't comprehend it. You're actually making wealth. The money is used to trade for wealth, but essentially, yeah, I'm going to go do stuff. It's so simple. It's so simple. It's so simple. I am going to do more work than I need to. You understand? I need to do this much work in order to stay alive in minimal circumstances, in crappy housing, with crappy food and crappy conditions and crappy clothes and all the rest. That's how much work I need to do to stay alive. And I'm going to voluntarily do more work than that because I'd like to have nicer stuff. Therefore, you don't get a 40-hour week out of me. Or in a socialist country, you might be lucky to get 6 hours of work in a week. 6 hours of surly work, by the way. Surly, incompetent, lazy, error-filled work a week because they're not being rewarded for their work. Doesn't matter whether they work or not. Doesn't matter whether they work 1 hour or 60 hours. The reward is the same. So why would you work 60 hours if the reward for 60 hours of work is the same as for 1 hour of work? You can run into young people who say, because of the good of this community and good of the society, and then you run them right back to, okay, well, Fidel Castro had $800 million and Bernie Sanders has 3 houses because of suckers like you. Because of people like you who believe that that is true, who believe that wishing something is true. You believe it right now. I understand that you do. I believe that kind of nonsense to some degree when I was your age too. You are going to get over this belief when you see people cheating in front of your eyes. That's when you're going to get over it. When you go to college and you have a roommate and you keep buying milk and the other guy keeps buying milk and the other guy keeps buying milk and one guy drinks your milk but never replaces the milk. That's when you're going to get over this idea. And you can call him on it and you can point it out to him, but it's not going to matter. They don't care. That one firewall on socialism ends with, friendlyism doesn't work because everybody likes to eat cookies, but not everybody likes to make cookies. Simple, period. That's all there is to it. And that, what's called selfishness, and how can you be so selfish, is again a reflection of that core misunderstanding. What do you mean? How could you be so selfish? Why do you have to have so much when other people have so little? Well, what I have has got nothing to do with what they have. Well, you should share it. Well, if I'm forced at gunpoint to share it with other people who are doing nothing, then certainly we can agree that the more I have, the more I can share, right? So even then you lose, you dumb socialist bastards. And we'll all end up eating the zoo creatures, right? But we'll be equally starving. That's what they want. And now you get to the brass tacks, Steve. You get to the brass tacks. The brass tacks of it is socialism is bought into by people who, in many cases, have a good heart and who are convinced that this is fair, but it's perpetrated by con men like Fidel Castro and Bernie Sanders, who would never in a million years have the money to buy a $600,000 lakefront house, except that he can sell this lie to suckers. And it's a profitable business. Fidel went out with $600, $700, $800 million worth of money. Fidel Castro, what would he have done in the real world? Or Hillary Clinton. What would Hillary Clinton be if she wasn't a politician? If she wasn't buying votes with my money, what would she be? I mean, honestly, seriously, we all know who she is. What would Hillary Clinton be out in the world? Bill Clinton would be, I think, Bill Clinton had a chance to become a millionaire and maybe a multimillionaire selling cars in Arkansas. I think he would have been superb at that. Now, whether he's got the discipline to do it, I don't know. I suspect he did or would have. But if Bill Clinton wasn't in politics, I can see Bill Clinton making $1 million or a couple $1 million a year because Clinton Chevrolet in Little Rock is the biggest Chevrolet dealer in the entire state. Or in the entire East, because Bill Clinton was good with people. He charmed the daylights out of people. He was a superb car salesman. And he would have earned that money too, by the way. Would have earned it instead of selling out the country for exchange for speaking fees and so on. But what would Hillary Clinton be, honestly? Somebody that unpleasant. What would they do out in the private sector? I suspect Hillary Clinton could find a job as a college administrator. I think that'd be about as far as she goes. She'd be a college administrator. I don't see her being a success in business because she's just too unpleasant. She's too narcissistic. She can't work with people. Azimuth Smith says that she would have been a crappy lawyer. Well, she was a crappy lawyer, but she wouldn't. Hillary Clinton could have gone on to be a personal injury attorney in Gainesville, Florida. Or maybe she would have been a personal injury attorney in Little Rock, and maybe she and Bill would have met, and maybe they would have fallen in love like they are today. But I doubt it. Bernie Sanders, what would Bernie Sanders do in the real world? What would Barack Obama do in the real world? Seriously, take his resume prior to him getting into the Senate race, and ask yourself, what would this guy be qualified to do? Well, what's his resume? Harvard Law. Extremely impressive. Very impressive. Columbia? Yep. Okay. Let's see what we have here. So you were president of the Harvard Law Review. I get more and more impressed every second, Mr. Obama. That's superb. This law firm has a very deep need for people with that kind of mind. What kind of law reviews? Can I see some of the law reviews that you wrote when you were the president of the Harvard Law Review? Oh, I didn't write any law reviews. I don't understand. What do you mean you didn't write any law reviews? I didn't write any law reviews. But you were president of Harvard Law Review. Yep. Why didn't you write any law reviews when you were the president of Harvard Law Review? Well, I actually did write law reviews, but they just weren't published. Aha. Now I begin to sense the outlines of a potential problem here. So I'm looking here at your resume, and it says that you were given a sizable advance. What was it, $60,000 to write a book? Yep. About race conditions in the inner city? Yep. But you didn't deliver the book. So what happened to the $60,000? Well, I just spent it. Okay. But you delivered the book? No, never did. So what happened? Well, I got somebody to pay me another $20,000, and then I had somebody else write a book about my life. So it was about you, yeah, but you didn't write it. No, not really. I think this interview is finished. Thank you very much for your time. We're really glad you came in. We'll call you if we have an open opportunity. He wouldn't have been a top lawyer. He would have been what he was. He would have been a guy who's out handing out forms and getting people riled up, you know? He would have been that. He's a narcissist. He's not a nice guy. Nobody likes him. Who are his friends? Does he have friends? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. He's a kid who was abandoned, what, 3 times? Well, 1 time forcibly. His dad left. And then his mom remarried. And then mom left that guy, who seems to have been one of the few good guys in the world, Sotero, Elder Sotero. And then his mom left him. And he had delusions of grandeur for as long as he's been Barack Obama. And he, by the way, he's been Barack Obama since about, what was it, 2004, maybe 2003. Prior to that, for his entire life, he was Barry Sotero. That's how he was in college. That's his name in college. It's the name he used, Barry Sotero. But Barack Obama sounds historic. Barry Sotero sounds a little more common than that, doesn't it? Anyway, Joe Biden. It's one of my oldest jokes. And not one of my best, but really, Joe Biden could not only not run Walmart, Joe Biden couldn't run a Walmart. I don't think Joe Biden's got the intellectual chops to run a Target store, let alone be president of Target. So anyway, that's what I would do, Steve. And hey, look at the time. It's almost 8 o'clock. Just a little under 2 hours of Stratosphere lounges here. I love wearing this orange shirt. It makes me blend into the background, and everything looks too pink. Well, I don't know what to do about that. But I guess we're not watching the show for the color balance. People remarked on the fact that the show got off the ground, started from the opening title card at a reasonable time, and the show came up, and the sound and the lights and the camera were working all at the same time. My God, it's a first. So that'll do it for the Stratosphere Lounge. 165, I guess. Is that right? Yep. Episode number 165. My God, don't you people have anything better to do? Apparently not. It's nothing like a good stretch. Okay, well, in any event, thanks very much for joining us. As always, this is made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com, and whose support we never take for granted and who we're very grateful for. David Booty just said I look like Pluto. He's right. I knew there was something wrong with this look, and it's true. The face has the same cast as Pluto. Hair's not terribly far from it either. Charon is badass looking. Charon looks like the Death Star, but Pluto's hideous. If that's true color of Pluto, then somebody needs to do some Photoshop work and get that planet into shape. Because a nice blue and a gray, that would have been cool. But this dead pink and this horrible beige, jeez, what a nasty place to live. Okay, that'll do it. Thanks again for joining us. The calendar up. I don't see any reason why. here's my promise to you. Here's my manufacturer's promise to you. This is the Bill Whittle guarantee. I don't see any reason why we can't do the show next week as things appear right at this second. Okay, that's got to be a promise that you don't find anywhere else in the business world. Anyway, that's it for 165. Thanks again for joining us. I'm going to just go ahead and hit the button now, Frank, and we'll see you next time.